After about a week of Path of Exile 322 Trial of the Ancestors, I had over 100 divines. Now, I didn't have 100 divines in raw currency, because especially at League start, it's not a good idea to leave all of your money just lying around. In fact, I invested quite a bit of it into my character, with some notable examples being my Corrupted +2 gems 6-link chest, which was worth over 10 divines, an Empower 4, a Corrupted helmet, so on and so forth. Plus, I did have about 55 raw divines, and nearly 10 more in Chaos. This is of course not counting things that I hadn't yet sold and all that stuff. But how did I get here? Because today's video isn't about the fact that I have 100 divines, and is about the fact that I wanted to take you through my journey from 0 to hero, starting day 1 all the way to 100 divines. For this, I'm going to go day by day and try to give a high-level overview of what I did and which important things made the difference, at least in terms of my currency acquisition for the day. So day 1, my goal was to get through the campaign, which I did in record time, and then I did some early maps. Overall, there wasn't anything too special that happened. My goal for the day was to get an Eye of Malice and a Mark of Submission. Luckily, while messing around with Trial of the Ancestors, I did end up getting a couple of sellable items, including a Cold Iron point that sold for 55 Chaos. This allowed me to buy both of the upgrades I wanted and have currency left over. And I set about completing a bit more of my Atlas and doing some essence farming. Essence farming is one of my favorite early League money-making strategies because you can do it just as effectively in Tier 1 maps as you can in Tier 16s. While I was doing this, I also got a few fortunate drops, literally the divination card, a raw divine, and I put some of my sulfite into delving where I got a flammability ring. I'd say this was pretty lucky and overall an outlier. And first, I farmed some of these essences on stream, which I'll link down below. Then, I sold them to buy a Legacy of Fury. Not only would this give me a bit of single target damage, but it made my clear much smoother. The clear was bothering me a little bit on cold dot, so I thought the pseudo-exploity effect would be a good idea. After that, I farmed a few more essences, it went much more smoothly, and I used TFD to bulk sell them. Because I didn't need essences, I needed money, and I didn't need the most money out of them, I needed to get the money as quickly as possible. Because I'd noticed that Einhar's memory of Crystal Prisons was way underpriced. So, at the end of the day, I bought several for 80C each. I believe I had a total of 6 by the end of the day, though I didn't quite keep the best notes here, so I apologize if that number's off by 1 or 2. Because from there, I ran through, sold some of the essences, this time via the trade site, bought some more, ending up with 12 total by the end of day 2, and selling off all the essences. By the time I liquidated this, roughly 4 hours of farming to do all that, and I spent those divines in 2 ways. First up, buying way more essence memories. I ended up getting 33 more of them, which cost around 22 divines. The remaining 8 I put into my character. Because at this point, I had a 5-link, and I needed a 6-link. I also had pretty much garbage gear, so I wanted at least enough defenses that the tier 1 to 6 maps I was going to be running were as fast and efficient as possible. This brought me to the end of day 2. Now moving on to day 3 and 4, I ran all 33 Atlas memories. I did have some money left over after all this, and I used that to put up a couple live searches for gear, but nothing too expensive or relevant. I think the most I spent on gear was like 40 Chaos that day. To reiterate, the 33 memories I bought were an average of 95 Chaos each. I spent around 3,135, which at the time was 22 divines. As I was running through, the price began to rise, and especially after my stream on day 4, the price rose to around 120 Chaos each. But I was getting about 370 Chaos, and I also kind of did a dumb thing. I saved up all the essences, which you can see here. If you're farming money, especially early League for yourself, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't save up a big old pile of around 12,000 Chaos worth of essences. I should have been selling them off as I got them, or at the very least, as I got a decent amount of them. Oh, I have a 50 stack of this essence? Yeah, I should sell that. 100 of that? Should sell it. So on and so forth. This would have allowed me to reinvest that currency into more Atlas memories. And if I had done that, instead of doing the stupid thing of giving a big pretty picture with lots of essences because people like it in YouTube videos, I probably would have hit 100 divines by day 5. But I didn't, and don't ever say I don't do nice things for you. So then we get to day 5, where I could have easily just run more essence memories. But to be honest with you, I was kind of bored of that. So instead, I decided I would sell off a good chunk of the essences, things that I didn't want to craft with, like Wrath, Hatred, and Anger. And I got around 40 divines from that. All the other essences I started crafting with. For example, throwing Essence of Envy or Essence of Torment at Stygian Vises. When I ran out of Stygian Vises, I threw Rest of a Torment at Quivers. I used Essence of Loathing on chest pieces, helmets, and boots, because boots with Ellie Void and helmets and chest pieces with RMR are highly in demand. My goal here was not to actually make expensive items. A lot of the items that I crafted, and I crafted roughly 100 of them, ended up selling for 30 or 40 chaos, but they sold relatively quickly. While most of the sales were relatively small, I did have a few standout items that sold for significantly more, the highest of which was 4 divines from an individual sale, and several sales did exceed 1. So I had between 10 and 20 divines from large sales, and everything else was from smaller sales. But there were a whole lot of smaller sales. During this time on day 5, I was doing 2 other important things. The first was crafting my own gear. I wanted a fractured Chaos Res base with dot multi, so I bought a few of those and crafted. I wanted spell suppression damage over time gloves, so I bought several bases for that, and also crafted selling the spares. And I wanted a new weapon, so I was buying fractured cold gem weapons and crafting on those. All told, I ended up spending about 12 divines on the gear that I finally was wearing, though I did recoup a significant amount of that in the sales that I mentioned earlier. And while I was profit crafting, I wasn't just sitting in my hideout. I was sitting in my hideout running live searches. For example, I picked up a +2 gem lightning coil that I 6-linked for a total of 10 divines. I picked up an Empower 4 for 5 divines. I bought a new ring for 2 divines. This was the Curse on Hit ring. A new amulet for 4 divines. And then I spent around 5 divines upgrading all my gems. My character that before now had had 10 divines or less of total investment, and was pretty darn scuffed, all of a sudden was ready to take on tier 16s. I just purchased around 26 divines in items, added about 12 divines in crafted items, and kept, let's just say, 5 divines of previous gear. So let's just round that out to a nice even 40. Also, if you're keeping track at home, this means my raw currency basically went back down to 0, but my build was in a much better state, and I had a lot of crafted items that I was selling off frequently. So I went to kill Eater and Exarch, complete most of my Atlas while the stuff sold, and had a grand old time. Now, over the rest of day 5 and then day 6, that happened. Now on day 6, I didn't really have that much time to play or farm. I was busy with other things. What I did have time for was sitting in my hideout while things sold, such as if I was doing video editing. I'm sure my CPU and graphics card absolutely hated me for it, but it did end up working out, because I was able to sell most of my crafted gear, leaving me with pretty much the currency that you saw at the start of the video. I'll just show that up on screen again. Now the short clip is from day 7, and I did sell off a few more things, did a little bit of crafting, odds and ends here and there. I also spent a little bit more on items, because I hadn't quite hit that 100 divine number. If you were keeping track, I had roughly 40 divines in gear, or at the very least 40 divines invested into my gear. You could buy a lot of the same items for a completely different price than I did. And then I had roughly 50 divines in my currency tab. So by early day 7, I picked up a well-rolled Cirrus Flask for 10 divines. I spent 3 divines on a corrupted helmet, and 2 more on alt quality gems that I needed for my build. This was another 15 divines in my character, bringing the total to around 45 divines in purchased gear, roughly 12 in crafted gear. So let's just say 50 divines in my character, and as you saw, I had over 50 divines in my stash, putting me at that magic 100 divine number, which was my goal. And so that's how I went from 0 to hero. But there's several other ways I could have done it. For example, I could have rushed those essences early on, then woven in beasts, and turned my character into a sanctum runner. If I'd done essences and beasts in maps, with a little expedition, and then forbidden sanctum for currency, I'm sure I would have reached the goal at about the same time as I did. Or I could have just not streamed the essence memory strategy, kept it quiet while the prices were high, and I would have made way more. I probably would have hit 200 divines instead of 100 divines. Or I could have skipped essences entirely and just sat in my hideout crafting with Rog. This would have also been extremely profitable and given me plenty of items that sold for 30C to 1 divine. But I tend to like to bounce between a bunch of different strategies rather than min-maxing one. So that's exactly what I did. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, mixing it up with Trial of the Ancestors here and there, though I didn't get a significant amount of currency from that, and ultimately meandering my way to my goal. I did this in the most fun way possible, not the most efficient way possible. With that said, I do hope you're able to learn at least a little bit from my upgrade order or the currency strats that I used, or just the fact that essences are often awesome early league. And don't worry, If you want to know more about my build, I have an upcoming video on that, which should be out within a couple days. It's going to be slightly later than I thought, probably coming out Monday, but don't hold me to that. It's done when it's done, and I'd rather the video be good than have the video be rushed for something as important as this. So if you want to know more about my build, get subscribed, leave a like while you're down there, and you'll see an update soon. But now, with that said, I'm curious, what's your zero to hero journey? It doesn't have to be 100 divines, and it doesn't have to be from this league, but just a time that you started out with nothing, set yourself a goal, and achieved that goal. Let me know some of the steps you took along the way down in the comments below. And if you're looking for something else to watch, I also recently finished my Path of Exile 322 Trial of the Ancestors Week 1 meta report. This is why this video ended up being a little delayed. I like doing the meta report, talking about builds that are successful, builds that aren't successful, and a little bit on why. So if you find that interesting, check it out up in the card and down in the description below. With that said, thanks for watching, and a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for their continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you can help make videos just like this one possible. And who knows, if I have enough patrons, maybe I'll even be able to trap an editor in my basement someday. Link to that is down in the description. And that's all for me today. Thanks again for watching. I hope you learned something. Maybe you enjoyed following along on my journey. And if so, maybe I'll see you again sometime soon.